Hello there. My name is Mr. Hayes. I teach advanced animation at Exceptional Minds. I'm a former animator on King of the Hill and The Simpsons, as well as being an active freelance animation artist. What I wanted to do today was to show you how to use simple shapes to make fun cartoony characters. But then I thought you and I may not be on the same page as far as what I'm talking about with shapes. So I wanted to do a little video to go over how we talk about shapes and how we use them, especially in something like character design. So we're going to talk about that first today, and then in our next episode we'll actually take those shapes we talk about and use them to create some characters. Today I'm going to be using Photoshop to draw in and using an Intuos tablet to input my drawings. You can use other input devices, or you can even draw this on paper. So in this episode, we're going to specifically break down what you need to do with Photoshop when you open it and what tools you're going to use. So the very first thing we're going to do is step one, create a new document. So once you open up your Photoshop, you are going to create a document that is 1920 by 1080 in pixel size. Then we want to keep the document pretty small so it's easy to load up. It doesn't have to be too large. Once we get into digital painting or we have to start adding a large amount of detail, we can bump the size up. But for now, we're just going to make it 75 dpi. Or pixels per inch. Now our second step that we want to do is we want to create a brush. So for this exercise, I'm using a really simple brush you can find in Photoshop. There are tons of different types of brushes to use in Photoshop. So I like this brush because it's simple. You don't have to import anything. Later we may get into importing different types of brushes for different effects. You have a large menu right now of brushes that we can use. So for this brush, we're going to go to the basic brushes, and we're going to create a hard round pressure opacity flow. Well, we're not going to create it. You're just going to press on the button that I show you here that says hard round pressure opacity and flow. Once you've chosen that brush, I like to put the size and the opacity on pressure. So depending on how much pressure I put on my stylus, I can make my line darker or lighter or thinner or thicker, right? All depending on how I use the pressure sensitivity. This kind of approximates sort of a marker pencil-y hybrid that I like to use. There are other pencils and pens type brushes that you can use that are really, really fun. But for now, I think this one will work just fine for us. So that's really all we need for our setup. So the next thing we're going to talk about are shapes. Shapes are something that we all are exposed to pretty early on in life, right? Little babies are given toys that are plastic and kind of represent the different basic shapes that we have to deal with. Now, those shapes we are going to come back to. We'll talk a little bit about now, but they're not the only shapes that we deal with in design. There are actually 3 different categories of shapes that we can use and put in our tool belt to use when we're trying to get different effects or to get across different things with our characters. So the first shapes that I'm struggling to draw correctly here, freehand, are what you think of when you think of shapes. They're your classic geometric shapes, right? Your squares, your circles, your triangles, right? Everything we see that's man-made, that's built around us, that we interact with, is made out of some combination of these shapes or shapes based on these shapes. We use them all the time, and we're going to continue using them as we create our characters. The next category of shapes are organic shapes. Okay, so these are a little bit different. Some of them kind of approximate our geometric shapes. Organic shapes are shapes we see occur in nature, like the outside edges of a pond or some sort of mutant pumpkin or a leaf. These are considered organic shapes. They don't have that symmetrical appearance that geometric shapes usually have. Right? They're usually kind of asymmetrical. And then our third category of shapes, which I'm going to put on another page here because I kind of run out of room, are known as our abstract shapes. Okay, these are shapes that don't relate to reality necessarily. They're more free-form shapes. You're looking at spirals or like cloud formations or smoke. But the other thing you're also looking at are symbols, are things like signs, things like stick figures, things like letters are abstracted images. So abstract shapes are depictions of real things that aren't exact representations of them. Okay? On the style spectrum, they're considered to be, way down towards the symbolic end of things, as opposed to the more realistic end of things. All right, so those are our three sort of categories of shapes. And there, once we sort of have gone over these categories, we're going to talk about taking shapes and pulling them into the third dimension. That's going to come a little bit later. Before we do that, let's go back to our geometric solids and talk about them a little bit. But actually, before we do that, I wanted to give you guys the opportunity to let us know what kind of characters maybe you'd like me to draw or break down into basic shapes for you. So if you have any characters you're thinking about, you can put them in the comments below, and we'll see if we can use them to break down some basic cartoon construction for you. So going back to the geometric solids, or the geometric shapes, if we look at them each individually, we can see that there is a certain psychology that we get from them. And by psychology, I mean that these shapes can generate different feelings. They can generate different moods. You can have a sense of a characteristic just by the shape that that character's made of, right? So when you think of squares, you think of things that are reliable, things that are stable. Squares and rectangles represent the borders of things and one of the most commonly used objects in man-made construction, right? You're probably sitting in a square right now. You're watching a square or looking at one as you watch this video. So it's a shape that's all around us. And interestingly enough, squares are the least used of these square shapes. You usually see rectangles more, or some kind of rectangle. And finally, as far as characters, squares represent strength, right? Think of Sully from Monsters, Inc. or Wreck-It Ralph, right? Strong characters are often represented by square or cubic shapes. The next one that I am making here using the stroke function, so I can get a nice perfect circle there, is our circle. Circles are one of the very first shapes you draw, when you're a little baby and you can first draw on, the wall with a permanent marker. You're usually drawing some weird form of circle, right? Circles are a very old shape for us, right? The sun is a circle. Circles don't have a beginning or end, so they denote sort of like infinite movement and harmony. Circles are also great because they focus attention to things that are inside of them, right? So they kind of act like a bullseye, right? A bullseye is a series of concentric circles leading to a target, right? So circles can act as spotlights focusing on what's inside them. And then as far as characters, right? Circles are friendly, right? Think about your most friendliest characters, and they're probably made up of some form of circles. SpongeBob being the exception to that rule. And so finally, as far as just these basic geometric shapes, we get to the triangle. So triangles imply stability. They can imply power and energy. Triangles can also give a sense of conflict or instability if they are balanced on their point. But if they're balanced on the base, then they can actually give a sense of stability. So they kind of can pull off both of those depending on how you orient the triangle. Triangles are great for pointing at things, right? Our eye tends to go towards the widest part and move towards the narrowest. So we use triangles to point at things, aka arrows. And then as far as character design, triangles are sharp. And if you look at a lot of villains, you'll see that a lot of them use triangular shapes to denote that sharpness and that dangerousness. So we're going to really dive much deeper into all of these shapes as we go along and as we continue with our series on how to draw these cartoony characters. So for now, I want to thank you guys for watching. Please make sure you subscribe to us to see more of this content. And please head to our website, whose link you should be seeing pop up at any moment. And finally, everybody be safe, and I look forward to working with you again soon.